Hello friends, many students have been requesting for this particular topic, a video on this topic, the gut-brain axis, because it seems that this is a commonly asked short note in many universities. So let's see what all things you can write in this particular topic, gut-brain axis. Now first thing is, please understand the term itself, gut-brain axis. Gut, the digestive tract, the GIT, and the brain, the nervous system, and the axis means there is interaction between these two systems. Now, first point is it is a bidirectional system. That's why we are calling it gut-brain axis, because it's a bidirectional axis in the sense that the gut would influence the functioning of the brain, and the brain or nervous system would have an influence on the functioning of the gut. So you can see here that it's a bidirectional system in the sense that the brain would send signals and influence the gut, and the gut peptides or signals arising from the gut would influence the functioning of the brain. In recent years, there is a lot of research going on about the gut microbiome, a leaky gut, and the gut peptides or toxins which may influence the functioning of liver and the brain. So it's an important topic in that sense. All right, so let's see both directions, starting with brain, how it influences the functioning of the gut. There are neural centers, and they control the gut functions. So brain and gut, brain-gut axis first. Okay, and gut releases the chemicals which influence the brain functions, which is what we saw just now. Let's start with the first one, the neural control of the digestive tract. The first direction, brain to gut. Now, there is neural control of the digestive tract. This will be the first point that you write. ANS, part of the nervous system, is the ANS, autonomic nervous system. It has got the branches, as you are aware, sympathetic and parasympathetic branches, and a third branch, which is the ENS, enteric nervous system. So the point is that the brain is influencing the gut functions via the ENS, enteric nervous system. Enteric is of course related to the digestive tract. Now ENS is considered a part of ANS actually. So therefore we have parasympathetic innervation in the form of vagus up to the distal colon, right from the upper digestive tract up to the distal colon, mid of the distal colon, there is vagus, parasympathetic nerve, and then there are pelvic parasympathetics starting from the sacral segments, those pelvic parasympathetics and the vagus, and the transmitter that they release is of course acetylcholine. Now this acetylcholine released by the ENS neurons will have increased motility and secretion. So gut motility and secretion will be influenced by the parasympathetic system via the release of acetylcholine as the transmitter. That's the first influence of the brain or nervous system on the gut functioning. And then there are afferent fibers, that is gut to brain signaling. Gut to brain signaling would occur via the afferent fibers, which start from the gut and will go to the brain. So you see, our gut mucosa has got a variety of receptors like chemoreceptors. They can sense the chemicals in the digestive tract in the form of consumed foodstuffs. There are osmoreceptors that will detect the osmolarity of the consumed foods, and there are mechanoreceptors. So mechanical distension of the gut wall by the foods, etc. And all these receptors from in the gut mucosa, they will signal via parasympathetic afferents, and those signals will first reach the medulla, and from the medulla there are central autonomic centers. So signals reaching central autonomic centers, and then parasympathetic efferents will come back to the gut. So the whole scheme is like this, that there are osmoreceptors, chemoreceptors, mechanoreceptors in the gut mucosa. They will sense the happenings in the digestive tract, in the gut, and then they will send the signals via the afferent vagal fibers, which will reach the highest autonomic centers, and then parasympathetic efferents will come back to the gut. This has been described as vagovagal reflex. Quite easy to understand. Vagus afferent taking signals from the gut to the brain, and vagus efferent fibers, signals going back to the gut and influencing the gut function. The other branch, the sympathetic branch, there are sympathetic fibers which generally influence the two aspects related to the gut. One is functioning of the sphincters, because you see, parasympathetic nerves, they are involved in the motility and secretion. Then sphincters are controlled by the sympathetic branch, and blood flow, vasoconstriction, vasodilation in the gut wall, that also would be under the influence of sympathetic fibers. So we saw how parasympathetic and sympathetic branches, that is brain or nervous system, affecting the gut function. Controlled by the cortex and hypothalamus, influencing the blood flow to the gut. There is a well-known story related to how gut blood flow or circulation is influenced by emotions and by the cortical thinking. There was a medical student, and he was operated upon in the same medical college and hospital where he was studying, and then later on, as a follow-up, proctoscopy was being performed. A scope is introduced into the rectum, and the mucosa is visible in the scope. So he must have been under sedative anesthesia or something like that, partially awake. And when it was just mentioned that your batchmates are also looking into the scope which was introduced into the rectum, and when it was mentioned, suddenly that rectal mucosa became red, it blushed. It means the blood flow suddenly increased in that region. This is when it was known that for the first time it was known that cortex and limbic system, or hypothalamus and emotions, they have some kind of a bearing on the blood flow in the digestive tract. So that's one part of the story. Okay, now going from gut to the brain, we saw so far brain to the gut, or nervous system, nerve fibers affecting or influencing the gut function, and the other way around is the gut to the brain signaling. How brain function is affected by the gut signaling. So there are chemicals released from the gut. They are called as GI peptides, and they can influence the brain centers. Yes, substances released from the gut mucosa can influence our some of the brain centers. For example, there is an eye cell in the gut mucosa. It releases CCK, cholecystokinin, and this cholecystokinin influences the satiety center in the hypothalamus. So after eating, that sense of satiety, that is influenced by this CCK released by the gut mucosa. Just an example of how gut peptides can influence the brain centers. Apart from that, of course, there is ghrelin released by the stomach. Ghrelin released by the gastric mucosa, and it is known to influence the hypothalamic centers and also influence the growth hormone release. That's why it's called as ghrelin, that is GH standing for growth hormone. So that's another example of how gut factors can influence the brain centers. Then there are dietary proteins which are broken down to amino acids, and those amino acids will be taken up by the brain neurons, and they will then synthesize neurotransmitters based on or by those amino acids which were produced from the food proteins, dietary proteins. So neurotransmitter synthesis in the brain, and in that sense functioning of the brain itself is critically dependent on the digestive system or gut proteins or peptides released from the gut mucosa. You know, there are tryptophan rich diets, and those tryptophan rich foods can cause formation of serotonin in the brain, and you know how serotonin as a neurotransmitter is associated with mood and other aspects of the human behavior. Secretion of dopamine. Dopamine, you know, is a pleasure transmitter. It's associated with pleasure, addictive behavior, and so on and so forth. Now, there are certain foodstuffs, for example, dark chocolate. This is known to produce dopamine synthesis or dopamine release by certain brain neurons. So, this is how gut and its functioning will influence the brain functions. So, this in summary is the gut-brain axis. To just summarize once again, gut can influence the brain functioning, and brain or nervous system can influence the functioning of the gut. So in a way, in the sense that it's a bidirectional axis.